Hear that? It's SpringFest savings calling your name, only at Lowe's. Right now, get a free Select Ego 56-volt battery when you buy a Select Ego trimmer, blower, or mower. Plus, get your choice of any 2 bags of Miracle-Gro organic soil mix for only $16. Shop these can't-miss deals in-store or online today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/2. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Excludes Hawaii.
It's time for basketball, and Uber Eats is dropping deals on game day favorites to keep you locked in on the action. Like when you're craving a buzzer beater, but also buffalo wings. Or when an upset makes you want to ugly cry into a pizza. And right now, Uber Eats has game day deals from Burger King, Buffalo Wild Wings, KFC, and hundreds more local favorites. So you can keep your eyes on the ball and your hands on a burger. Order now, only on Uber Eats. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals participating in the show. All persons described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions along with adult language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. In 1904, a geologist and treasure hunter, J.C. Brown, was hired by a mining company to hunt for gold in Northern California. During his explorations, he claimed to have come across a rockfall at the base of a cliff. Suspecting that there was something buried underneath it, he began to dig and clear away the rocks. What he finds is a cave, and 11 miles later, a myth, a legend, or a truth was found. You're listening to the Mysterious Brews podcast, and tonight we bring you the case of J.C. Brown's Lost City. Welcome to a deep, dark, dank, moist basement somewhere in the bowels of Georgia. Well, ladies and gentlemen, spring is sprung and the allergies are upon us. My vehicles are yeller, and my dog was left out while we visited my son for 3 days and came home, and he was not gray anymore. He was a nice shade of yellow, which yellow pollen on a gray dog makes him look a little green. So he got a bath, and he's pouting right now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a gander at the old Patreon page. Let's give a big basement welcome to Brianna Exume, Melody Cochran, and Kelly Davis. Welcome to the shit show, boys and girls. A little bit on the last episode. Let's see what they was saying. The Theo Hayes. They enjoyed it. Cody Down Under has given us quite a list. So we will be going back to the penal colony. I'm just joking. For some episodes. It's an untapped resource that I think we're going to visit quite often. We did get I got the first batch of bumper stickers, which it's a big ass square sticker. I think it's like 2.5 inches by 3 inches, maybe. Anyway, I got those mailed out. Second batch will go out this week, so hopefully by the weekend after you hear this drop on April Fools, you will have yours. But that's all of the bells and nails. So let's get after the episode. Like I said in the opener, tonight we're going to be going over J.C. Brown's Lost City. Now, take this with a grain of salt. Either you are a believer that there's some weird shit going on around Mount Shasta, or you are not. But one thing we do know for sure is there was a man, we'll get to that. But there was a man who in 1903, 1904 was tasked by the Lord Cowdray Mining Company of England to find gold in them there hills of the Cascades Mountains. Now, not much is known about the man named J.C. Brown. And when I say not much is known, I mean I couldn't find a whole lot of anything. He was around 34 years of age when he was asked to go find gold in the Cascades. We know he's a geologist, and we know that he's looking for gold or signs on the surface that gold may lay underneath in a geological sense. Now, the story goes that he sees some granite outcroppings, knowing that granite is a good place to start kind of prospecting. He goes around, starts some digging around, and he continues to dig and prod and poke, and eventually finds a peculiar area on the side of a massive granite outcropping. And to him, it looks kind of unnatural. And while there are rock falls in the area, this one just does not look like nature made it occur. And unnatural in the fact that it doesn't match any of the surrounding rocks. So as he's studying this quote unquote rock fall, he begins to notice that it really doesn't match the surrounding rocks at all. Like, the rocks are out of place. There's none of these rocks in the surrounding area. So this piques his interest, and he starts digging into this rock fall, moving what he can. And within a few moments, he discovers a small cave. And he kind of enlarges it and was able to squeeze through a small opening. Now, according to his account, he gets in the cave and he starts traveling down the cave for 11 miles. So let's do the math. So there'll be moments tonight where you'll be like, damn, he don't believe anything he's talking about. And then there'll be moments where you're like, man, he believes everything. So let's just say he's walking a 20-minute mile. Okay. And we're talking almost, well, it's 3 2/3. So 3 hours and 40 minutes, he's just walking. At what point do you not just say, there's nothing here? Or are you so intrigued that you found this cave that you are able to stand up in that you think, man, this is unnatural. I'm just going to chase it till its end? Not me. No, not me. I'm not walking 11 miles for hardly anything, much less gold. I don't know. It's chalk one up for the I don't believe this shit side. Either way, he walks traveling downhill, kind of is what he says, for 11 miles. So as he's traveling, he begins to see areas of the cave walls that appear that they have been worked from a mining standpoint. Now, he states that somebody had basically been there before and they manipulated the cave walls looking for stuff. So it's been prospected before is what he's thinking. So as he gets deeper into the cave, he says those walls begin to have indentations in them. And these indentations remind him of a honeycomb pattern. He also notices that his torch, yes, torch as in Indiana Jones fire torch, not a torch like people outside of the U.S. call a flashlight. So as his torch gets closer to these honeycomb patterns, they seem to be made of or have a coating of some sort of shiny material on them. So eventually, as he's walking down the cave, he eventually comes to what he described as a room that has been carved out of the stone. In this room, he finds artifacts that he described as copper or gold plates that have inscriptions on them, similar to runes. Now, he called this room that he found the village, and he begins to explore further, and he finds more rooms that are carved out of the rock, where he states that he finds weapons like spears with copper arrowheads on them. Weird thing about these copper arrowheads, and I say copper in air quotes, he states that if you bent them, they would bend back to normal, kind of like the memory metal. He also finds statues that are similar to statues found in the Chinese catacombs of Emperor Shenxu Wang. In the first room, so that's the terracotta warriors. In the first room, he also finds 8 or 9 mummies. And these mummies were between 7 and 8 feet tall. Yes, we're dabbing our toe in the joints realm. He also describes that all of the rooms measure approximately 11 feet by 34 feet. The larger room that he went into, he theorized, was for a king or queen of whoever tribe, race built this, because they were taller than any of the other mummies. Now, these taller mummies that he's named the king and the queen are also dressed in what he describes as royal garb. So, again, strengthening his hypothesis that this is a ruling pair. Also in the room, he finds some artwork on the wall, like a huge sunscape. Now, we all know this because J.C. Brown arrives in Stockton, California 30 years later in 1934, and when he shows up in Stockton, he's in his late 70s. Now, while he's in Stockton, he begins to put together, or tries to put together, a search party to go back to the cave he originally found back in 1903, 1904. He sells this trip to a group of people by convincing them that they're going to be wealthy beyond belief. He is also trying to show the world what he found. So he starts having these meetings twice a week at people's houses that he knew in Stockton. And it was stated that up to 80 people had shown up. Now, approximately 1 to 2 days before they were to embark on this expedition, these 80 people began listening more and more intently. And he, JC, tells this group that he was going to bring in a boat so that they could make the most of the journey using this boat. Basically, they're going to travel by river as far as they can, disembark, and then go by foot. Now, he never reveals the exact location of their destination. All he would say was that they were headed somewhere in the Cascades. He also never said that they were traveling to Mount Shasta, even though if you look this up, Mount Shasta is synonymous with J.C. Brown's Lost City. So in the 1 to 2 days before the search party was to take this boat trip, J.C. tells everyone that he's going to go grab something that he brought back from the cave to prove he is not trying to swindle any of them. He tells them that this quote-unquote proof was stashed away in a secure location. He leaves and is never seen again. After JC is a no-show, the police get involved, like they usually do. And they're trying to find out whether this guy was a swindler and what the hell was exactly going on. OJC had claimed that he had millions and millions of dollars and that he was very wealthy. It is worth noting that he never took any money from anyone, so there was actually no crime committed. He wasn't trying to swindle money out of people like Earl Shives here and skip town. J.C. Brown basically falls off the face of the earth. No one in this quote-unquote expedition actually knew where the cave was located, which was smart on his part. It was assumed that they were headed to the Mount Shasta area based off what J.C. had divulged in his lectures. Now, during his meetings, he would make reference to the Lemurians. And this is where everyone in the expedition got the idea that they were ultimately headed to Mount Shasta. Now, there is insufficient evidence that J.C. was in the area around Mount Shasta doing certain excavations. So it sounds like during the time between him finding the cave and him having these meetings, he was trying to figure out what he had found. And he was trying to work with other people to get what he had found out of the cave. Basically, he was trying to secure a substantial quote-unquote finder's fee as well as making sure his name would be credited with this historical find. So in an article released in the Stockton Journal, it states that there were 2 rooms that JC found, and these rooms were about 11 by 34 feet, both filled with copper and gold tablets that measured about 3 inches by 4 inches. One room contained these tablets that had the rune type writing on them, and the other contained a lot of weapons. Now, that is the weapon room is where he allegedly found those copper-tipped spears. Now, JC stated that one could bend the head of the weapon to the base of the shaft and it would spring back into place. That was in the article. It also states in the article that there were quote-unquote streets laid out in the village room. Now, the village room was the one long room, and this is where there were notches laid at odd angles. In these notches were 27 skeletons, the smallest of which were 6 feet 6 inches tall, and the tallest measuring more than 10 feet. In another room, there laid the bodies of a man and a woman dressed in royal robes, apparently embalmed by some secret process. Now, this is the king and queen of this lost race that JC hypothesized about. Now, in the article, JC stated that the worship room was, quote, beautiful to behold. There on the walls were 3 great crosses, not of the conventional modern type, and a sun design worked in copper and gold. The streamers from the sun were worked in gold, 13 in total, end quote. Further along in the article, he goes on to state, quote, I believe this race of people forms an important link in ancient American civilization. They were highly skilled craftsmen, as their work shows, because there was a glow to 3 of the statues. I believe they used radium, and I believe it was the use of radium that they tempered the copper with, end quote. JC wanted the help of trained people whom he would pay well for their services to catalog these artifacts. He wanted the relics in the cave to remain intact so that they could be displayed in museums. But the ones in the 2 other caves he located were to go to those who aided him so that they could become rich, a finder's fee, if you will. In a vault in a Texas bank, he claimed to have pictures of the cave and papers that corroborate his find. He stated, quote, you see, my family planned to exploit the cave themselves. My wife's father, my wife, my daughters, and an old college I attended. A series of tragedies struck. First, one died, then another. One was killed in an accident, and the others died, end quote. So basically, his family's getting picked off by what could be seen as a curse. Now, he would go on to state, quote, I was hurt in an accident. I lost all heart in this accident, but I'm getting back on my feet again, and if my health holds out, I will get started, end quote. So that kind of leads you to down the path of that's why he was kind of MIA for 30 years from finding the cave until he shows up in Stockton. Or he was researching for 30 years and he was hurt during that time. The end of the article has JC stating, quote, have you ever studied or read anything about the lost continent of Lemuria? Scientists claim it is the connecting link in the story of civilization. I believe here is the key to that lost continent, end quote. He believed that that cave had something to do with Lemuria. At the very least, it was a race of people that were unknown. Now, J.C. Brown claimed to be worth $48 million and owned 5 boats in 1934. That $48 million equates to $1.142 billion in today's money. But getting back to it, one of his 5 boats was claimed to be a glass-bottomed boat, and that one would take the party to search for the lost continent off the coast of Washington. I don't know what the significance to that is, but that's what it states. Now, it would appear that JC's expedition was twofold. One of it or one of the reasons, was to look for the cave that he knew he had seen, as well as he was hoping to find evidence of the lost continent of Lemuria. One of the more confusing things that investigators found after JC disappeared was despite his public persona, he was not a grifter. He was not trying to swindle people out of money. He never took any money from anybody. And he also kept his story the same, never deviating from what he found or embellishing what he found, never deviating from what he saw or embellishing what he saw. So chalk one up to, hey, he found something. Now, authorities and the paper at the time basically wrote JC off as a hoaxer because he disappeared right after he was supposed to bring this expedition party to the mountain. We have some other information that doesn't really line up with the old shyster angle, too. JC had been researching what civilization he may have stumbled upon in that cave. And when you get to his statement on Lemuria, he had just finished researching Churchward and Blavatsky and the Dweller on Two Planets when he comes to his conclusion that the cave must be connected to the lost continent of Lemuria. Now, we don't know, and we'll probably never know, if there is a correlation between Lemuria and the cave, but JC had claimed he had photos and other proof of his discovery in a Texas bank. Now, this proof was demanded of him by another man who went by the name of Pratt. Old Pratt had demanded proof of what JC had found in the cave, or he was going to withdraw any future partnership if he didn't see evidence. After JC didn't show up on the docks that day, the expedition party thought he had manufactured the story of the cave based on those novels I just referenced. Others believed that JC would return. So let's pause for a second. It's 1934. We're in the Great Depression, okay? He's not taking any money from anybody. So you would think if he was a snake oil salesman, he would be, hey, finance this. Give me $100 and you'll get a return of thousands of dollars when we found this cave. He didn't take any money. Now, the Pratt guy sounds like he wanted to be a partner and he was supplying probably supplies for the expedition party. 80 people is a lot of damn people to keep up with. So, again, chalk that up to if JC is a real person and not an alias, maybe he did find something. So we have this unbelievable story and the assumption that it's Mount Shasta. That's where the cave must be. But again, he never references Mount Shasta. It's not like we just renamed Mount Shasta after the Great Depression. So one of the questions that's always posed is that if it was not Mount Shasta, then where the hell else could it be? We have J.C. Brown digging around looking for possible gold veins, and he finds this, out of the ordinary rockfall. Opens up this little hole, squeezes in, finds this downward sloping cave that goes on for 11 miles. It's extremely dark. He's thinking, I just found a cave that was covered up by rocks. There's a high probability that since it was surrounded by granite, I'm going to find some gold veins. That was what he was tasked to find. That was his job. And that kind of leads some credibility to what he found inside the cave, I believe. He was not just, quote, unquote, wandering the mountainside and stumbled upon a cave out of the blue. The copper plates that are referenced several times, and I think that's because he actually found a shit ton of them. And that was the way that this civilization recorded their history. He also found the weapons and the mummified corpses. And here's the thing. It does take a special piece of shit to grift someone. And a lot of times, the details of a story are so fantastical that you're like, it doesn't pass the smell test. I didn't get that when I researched this. There were some things that you were like, the copper bending back, okay, that kind of raises, tickles the old spidey senses. But it's not unheard of, if you start researching the area, that there were mummies in caves or copper tablets in caves. So again, he's not way out there on his description of what he says he found. We still have the issue of where this cave is actually located. He only said the Cascades, and the assumption again was Mount Shasta, but Mount Shasta is a huge mountain. The area of Mount Shasta has been remote viewed. Now, if you don't believe in remote viewing, you can go ahead and cut it off now, because this is going to be the basis for a lot of the research that I found. There was a lot of remote viewers tasked with trying to dive into this story to see if it was true. So during one of these remote viewing sessions, it was revealed that a location called the Castle Crags was of really high importance. They needed to really go to the Castle Crags and start looking around. The remote viewers described the area having steep granite spires, and one of the hallmarks of that area was that climbers accessing those steep granite spires must use a tightrope system to walk from spire to spire. Again, why? If you've got to use a tightrope to get between two places, your human ass ain't supposed to go there. But I digress. The remote viewers were getting visuals of a massive volcanic snow-capped mountain. Another tick for it being Mount Shasta. Allegedly, the area described by J.C. Brown matched the Castle Crags. So researchers now have a concrete location and landmark. The Castle Crags is often referred to as, quote, abode of the devil. And if you have been following this podcast for any sort of length, we did a whole devil series. And no thank you. They don't put the devil's name in it if it ain't got some evil shit going on. Now, the abode of the devil is what the indigenous tribes of the area had called that location, and they warned, do not go in there after dark. Good enough for me. I'm just not going to go. Now, this area is where, quote, unquote, darkness reigns, according to the indigenous tribes. It's where the devil comes out at night. This would be the yang to the yin of the light that Mount Shasta is supposed to reference. When you research the Castle Crags, you find that there are some petroglyphs that show a swastika, not the Nazi version, so get that out of your little pea brains. It is said that the petroglyphs were left by Native Americans because you also find handprints on a rock painted with ochre paint. Originally found in the 1940s and 1950s by some kids who were playing around on a creek, who came across this site, they described it as a red handprint on a rock, along with some other symbols like the swastika. There was a lot of representations of bulls and some more rune inscriptions. Now, this is not just on one rock, but on a series of rocks. There was what was described as an iron cross, several swirl patterns, and if you've done any research into indigenous rock art, it's widely believed that those swirl patterns are vortexes to other worlds, or a place where the gods will come and visit. What does it tell us? I don't know. According to the boys who discovered the petroglyphs, the handprint was extremely bright and appeared to be a lot newer than any of the other carvings. It was theorized that the handprint was there or placed there in the 20s or 30s. Now, some people have theorized that J.C. Brown carved the symbol symbols as a marker, so he knew where to start searching for gold. Like, the way it was explained in what I read was he's in the area, seeing granite, he has to go back and resupply, so he makes some carvings in the rock, and then he puts this red handprint up there as a marker for him to find the place, and it was not indigenous. Who knows? The site is not well known and is not easily accessible. Some of the original theories on the site is that some rocks fell down from up above, and on those rocks were the carvings that were done by the Lemurians. Now, these large slabs stayed intact and landed in the place where the boys found them. Other people say that no, none of that is true, that the carvings were strictly from the local indigenous Native American tribes of the area as a sort of their history or written history. Now, the remote viewers stated that they saw J.C. Brown in the act of carving something into stone, so they believed these were done by him, like I said, as a marker to find the site again. Now, J.C. could have seen the biggest granite outcropping and knew that this is where he needed to start looking for gold, and like I said, run out of supplies and was like, I'm not going to risk everything. I'll just come back freshly stocked and look at it again. I'm going to do this to mark the spot. The question still remains, how do you get from the petroglyph site to the cave site? Again, referencing the remote viewing data, the remote viewers would state that there are glyphs in the forest, patterns in the forest, and they will be a marker point to the cave. You are to look for these glyphs in the forest, and there is a bear putting sticks on the ground and rocks on the ground and making glyphs and patterns. Not making a lot of sense with that description, but sometimes what viewers described can be metaphorical. Viewers can also just be dumping information on a page as it's just flashing across their mind's eye and not really understanding what it is or what it means. Now, the next part may require you to buckle up your tinfoil hat, so stick with me. Bigfoot has been described as, quote, the Watchers. Okay? And if you believe in Bigfoot, you know that they will make tree structures in the forest, symbols with vines and branches. Could the remote viewers that said a quote-unquote bear was making structures and putting sticks in the ground be referring to remote viewing and Bigfoot actually making tree structures? Do these structures indicate the path to follow to get from the petroglyph site to the cave? Sounds like a fairy tale, I know. But if you've been watching the old Expedition Bigfoot, you will know they found a ton of, vine art, branches, all of that stuff. So, not as far-fetched as you may think, if you believe in Bigfoot. If not, why are you listening to this podcast? I mean, we got Bigfoot on our logo. Come on, folks. Now, we still have this legend that this area is the place of the devil. Why is it being called that, and what is going on at the Castle Craigs? Some mountains have a history of being haunted or being a place of high strangeness where a lot of paranormal activity occurs. J.C. Brown was hanging out in the area looking for gold when allegedly he begins experiencing what has been described as coming into contact with a lot of malicious spirits. These spirits, J.C. believed, were the spirits of this mysterious race of giants that he had found. Remote viewers also attempted to look into who specifically this king and queen were that he had found in the cave. The viewers were tasked with looking at why were they in the cave, who were they, and where did they come from. It was stated that several remote viewers said that they had viewed this race attempting to flee a major cataclysm that was occurring. This cataclysm tied into what JC had seen in the king and queen room that had the big sun on the wall. The sun had created or expelled this cataclysm that wreaked havoc on the earth. Another king was found north of the Castle Crags in an area called the Lava Beds National Monument. Now, this area holds a lot of caves and is located northeast of Raika. The Native American tribes of that area stated that some of their ancestors had lived in the caves. Now, the National Park Service actually shut down one of the caves from public access because they were hearing rumors that there were several petroglyphs in that particular cave. Allegedly, the petroglyphs showed a lot of symbols relating to the sun and the sun doing some type of damage to the earth. This was the reason the Native American tribes had moved into the caves. The caves had protected them from whatever was going on with the sun. Now, this was theorized to have happened about 12,000 years ago. Now, the remote viewers did not come across anything like an Atlantean race coming from the ocean. They were quite specific in that the people came from the general area of the caves. Some people believe that they were a race of giants that were in the area. Now, J.C. Brown, based on his research after he originally found the cave, believed that they had to be the Lemurians. It was the only thing to him that made sense. So now is as good of time as any to dip our little toes in the Lemurian waters. Now, the idea of there being a continent called Lemuria has pretty much been debunked. But, again, who knows? We could have a continent, or we could have had a continent out in the Pacific Ocean. What we do know for certain is there was a big cataclysm in the ancient world. The oceans were much lower, and there were a lot of inhabited islands. In that sense, we could have a quote-unquote seafaring society escaping an oceanic cataclysm. They could have taken refuge on larger land masses. An oddity in the Atlantic that a lot of people point to as the remains of a lost continent is the Azores. It is in the middle of nowhere. Now, in the Pacific, you have Hawaii basically popping up in the middle of nowhere. In the Indian Ocean, there are a ton of island chains that could have potentially been part of a much larger continent that is now below sea level. The news or idea of Lemuria started in the mid-1800s, and as of 2025, there are still videos on the subject being made. Hell, here I am doing a podcast on it, so there you have it. Now, the land of Mu was also rumored to be a lost continent in the Pacific, and Hawaii has been theorized to be the remnants of that lost continent Mu. If you dive deep into Lemuria, it was said to have originated in the Indian Ocean. J.C. Brown, with all the knowledge that he had and pointing to a location that could potentially lift the veil on Mu or Lemuria, could have stumbled across something. It is said that he left to go get this evidence that pointed to a lost continent. You know, and it, again, remember, it was allegedly stored in a Texas bank. Now, he could have been going to physically remove this evidence from the bank, or he could have left Stockton to meet someone that was bringing said evidence to him. So if we go back to the remote viewers, they were once again tasked with trying to see what had actually happened to J.C. Brown. I don't think they were given his name. I think they were just saying that a man disappeared in 1934 from Stockton. You know, that's your parameters, yada, yada, yada. They allegedly saw a very old man who was at the end of his life. This man knew death was knocking. He expected that he was going to be killed, and he was extremely tired and frail because he had had a life of tribulation after finding a cave. So far, checking boxes that we need that this is J.C. Brown. They go on to state that everybody wanted to be wealthy and exploit this cave for financial gain. This old man was tired of all of it, and he knew that death was near. He was in a hotel room, and this would have been either right before he had some evidence of the cave, or he was about to get the evidence of a cave. They, in air quotes, arrived at the hotel room and greeted him. He knew what they were there for. Allegedly, the remote viewer saw these men break this older man's neck, and they take his body along with said evidence. Now, it was said that they actually took his body out to an area and buried him, quote, within rocks and dirt. Now, these people then went to the cave site and buried it further. Allegedly, they were part of a secret society that did not want this lost civilization coming to light. Now, according to remote viewers, this was what happened to J.C. Brown after he left the expedition party to go get said evidence of the cave. It has been theorized that this secret society was more of a cult who had gotten close to JC at the beginning of him beginning to talk, or at the beginning of his talks about what he had found. So when he got too close to exposing what he had found to the public, i.e. this evidence, maybe displaying some of the artifacts that he had, they killed him. The next task for the remote viewers was to see if they could find the cave, more specifically if all the artifacts were still there. And it was stated that several viewers said that the cave had not been pillaged and that it was sealed and further concealed from anyone finding it.
Hey, Fidelity, how can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
Now we dive into part of J.C. Brown's research and the fact that he believed he had found the lost city of Lemuria named Telos. Now, the theory of Telos was first put forth by Aristotle, and he stated that Telos can encompass all forms of human activity. For instance, the telos of warfare is victory, or the telos of business is the creation of wealth. In his definition, there are telos that are subordinate to other telos. All activities have their own respective goals, and for Aristotle, the subordinate telos can become the means to achieve more fundamental telos. Through this concept, Aristotle underscored the importance of politics and that all other fields are subservient to it. Aristotle gave the example that the telos of blacksmith is the production of a sword. The telos of the swordsman, which uses the sword as a weapon, is to kill or incapacitate an enemy. He expounded this line of thinking by stating that the telos of these occupations are merely part of the purpose of a ruler. The ruler must oversee the direction and well-being of his kingdom. Telos, as it applies to Lemuria, is a city or a Lemurian colony under Mount Shasta in Northern California. A city of, quote, Lot, governed by a council of 12 ascended masters and its high priest, Adama. Buckle up, Buttercup, is all I can tell you, because this part of Lemuria is where I'm like, nope, I ain't buying what you putting down. But I'll let you decide. According to them, the name Telos means communication with spirit. The citizens of this city, Telos, formerly of Lemuria, are working toward the ascension. They can astral project to any location and can telecommunicate to anyone in any locality of time and space. In Adama's messages of empowerment, he states that their goal is, quote, to become a spiritual warrior, one who acknowledges the light within, and to reunite humanity into one human family. For once humanity feels God's love directly from within, all will be able to understand their purpose for being here on earth and will cease to feel the separation of their soul from God's light, end quote. It is said that all planets are hollow and are inhabited by human life of one vibration or another. The sun is also hollow, and it is not hot but cold. Our earth is hollow and contains an inner central sun. The governing city within the inner earth is called Shambhala. It is located inside the very center of the planet and can be accessed through holes at either the north or south pole of the planet. The northern and southern lights that we see in our skies are actually reflections of Earth's inner central sun emanating from her hollow core. There are over 120 subterranean cities located within the Earth's crust. These cities of light are not far beneath the Earth's surface. As a grouping, these cities are called the Agartha Network. The inner Earth beings are highly evolved beings living on the interior surface of the hollow Earth. They are mostly ascended souls who have chosen to continue their evolution in Earth's inner recesses because of the perfection of conditions that exist there. Though Atlantis and Lemuria have become myths on the surface, the people from Atlantis and Lemuria are actually flourishing in these underground cities. The people within these colonies are normal people who also live in the third dimension. According to the theory of Lemuria and Telos, our Milky Way galaxy is divided into 12 sectors. Our solar system is located in Sector 9, and this sector contains hundreds of other solar systems. The Ashtar Command, also known as the Galactic Command, is composed of millions of starships and volunteers from many star systems and dimensions within our galaxy. The Galactic Command is the part of the Confederation of Planets and protects sectors of the Milky Way galaxy. Their purpose is to assist Earth through cycles of planetary ascension. Ashtar is the Confederation of Planets commander for Earth's sector. That's a mouthful. The Silver Fleet oversees our solar system and has its spaceport inside Mount Shasta. Anton, who is from Telos, is the name of the commander of said Silver Fleet. It is primarily the people from the subterranean cities who serve on said Silver Fleet. The welcome message allegedly given to Earth from the Confederation of Planets states, quote, "Know who you are. Know you are on a great galactic mission. Know we all travel beside you as one," end quote. This is followed by a welcome message from Adama. Quote, "Greetings from Telos. We have been telecommunicating with several Earth people, giving them messages to publish on our behalf. We urge you to read the messages in our book, for its purpose is to awaken you to our existence, to bring you to your awareness, the full consciousness of the Kadashians, and to sound the call to awaken to the world around you. We had journeyed far to reach our goal in consciousness and had to go into the depths of the earth to find true peace. Telos is our home, our haven, and we don't want to leave it, not for very long at least. Travel with us on the divine path to God, acknowledging your divinity every step of the way, as we step together, one step from below and one step from above, in the divine walk through life, meeting as one in the stars." End quote. To each his own, but that is the deeper you get into Lemuria and the City of Light inside Mount Shasta, there's some things that'll make you scratch your head. I'm not going to try and throw shade. Like I said, to each his own. Now, John Benjamin Bodie, who is this person? Well, Stephen Sindoni, a New York paranormal researcher and filmmaker, has stated that he believes he has found the true identity of J.C. Brown, and that is none other than John Benjamin Brodie, or J.B. Brodie, as Mr. Sindoni says. He says that old J.B. Brodie was a retired mining engineer who had worked in Mexico and elsewhere for, you guessed it, Lord Caldray Mining Company of England. Sindoni unearthed records that show Bodie's in-laws lived in a house right across San Joaquin Street from the one in which J.C. Brown lectured about Lemuria. damning evidence, if I do say so myself. It's on redcircle.com, Mr. Sindoni states, quote, "It is my strong belief that J.C. Brown was really a man named John Benjamin Bodie, who showed up at the Stockton Records editor's office in 1934, claiming to have made an amazing discovery of an ancient civilization of giant Lemurians living under the bowels of a mountain in the Cascade Mountain Range while working as a prospector / civil engineer for the Lord Caldray Mining Company of England 30 years prior." J.C. Brown claimed to have found Queen Etruscand and her embalmed husband, the king. J.C. Brown discovered the ancient plates of time. This and other artifacts are hidden in a Laredo, Texas bank. My research tracks John Benjamin Bodie and his wife, Mary Hammer Bodie, coming through Mexico to Laredo, Texas, and then on to Mary Hammer's relatives, the Hammers, who also lived on 1725 San Joaquin Street. The Hammer family still owned the house across the street from where retired printer John C. Root lived and held meetings for 6 weeks with the fictitious J.C. Brown, aliases John Benjamin Bodie, at North 1784 San Joaquin Street. John Benjamin Bodie was a frequent visitor from 1903 to 1934 to Stockton, California, on his travels back and forth to the Shasta Springs Resort in Dunsmuir, California. American folklore and legend is now one less mystery due to my relentless pursuit in solving the legend of J.C. Brown, alias John Benjamin Bodie, who, working his entire career as a civil engineer for the Lord Caldray Mining Company of England, Lord Caldray was really a man named Wheatman Pearson, who was knighted in 1916, thus the title of First Viscount was awarded to him. Now that just scratches the surface of what is rumored to be going on inside and around Mount Shasta. Like I said at the beginning, I don't know. I'm on the fence as to whether this whole story is real or not. I want to believe, and we say that a lot on here, that a man, whether his name was Bodie or Brown, did find a cave. Would I have walked 11 miles? No. Hell no. But again, I go back to the descriptions of what he says he's found. He's not over embellishing things. I don't know. Lots of unanswered questions on this one. So let us know if you are interested in hearing more about Telos, the Lemurians, or the Hollow Earth theory. We would gladly dive deeper into any of those. If you have a Hollow Earth theory or a Lemurian rabbit hole you'd like for us to chase, let us know. You can message us on the old Patreon messages. You can DM us on our social media, or you can email us at mysteriousbrews@gmail.com. One thing I wanted to recommend, and this is an oldie, but my wife had never seen True Detective, the first season. So we started watching it again, and I'd watched it probably, 10 years ago, and there's a lot that I'd forgotten. So if you've never seen True Detective, the first season, please give it a go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as far as I know, there's nothing else. So, deuces.